What's up, Notjust developers? Welcome back to a new live stream, and I'm super excited about today's build because we are continuing the application that we started previous week, and here I'm talking about the WhatsApp clone. So previous week we have managed to build the user interface of WhatsApp clone, and if you have missed that, you can check it out on our channel. And today we're gonna take this build to the next level, and we're gonna work on the backend side of it. So yeah, let's have a look at what is going to be the plan for today. So the plan for today is going to be to start creating and managing the AWS Amplify backend that will where we will manage all of the resources that will help us build the backend, including the database, API, and so on. After that, we're gonna implement the authentication in our application to let users sign in and create a new account, manage their account, manage their password, and so on. After that's done, we're gonna get into the database, and we're gonna start by modeling the database. We're gonna think about what data we will need in our application, and then we're gonna define this data there. We'll create the relationship between models, and that will allow us to query the data using GraphQL in our React Native application. So yeah, the next step would be to actually implement these queries, mutations, subscriptions in our application to get and fetch all the dynamic data from our database. And yeah, that is the plan for today. In order to follow along, I have prepared for you the asset bundle that you can get by following, give me 1 second, here. Yeah, to get the asset bundle, it actually should be WhatsApp 2 without 0. Follow the link in the description below and you will receive the asset bundle and also the source code and also this step-by-step guide that we are using to help us move along this build. So yeah, here, as you can see, I'm providing a lot of code snippets in order for you to check it out if you get stuck throughout this build. So how are you guys doing? Everyone from the live chat. Can you hear me well? Everything is fine? All right. Let me double check if everything is okay. A-okay. Let me know how did it go for the first part, for the user interface part. Did you implement it and do you have it ready? Because that would be really great. However, if you're interested only in the backend part, that's also possible because yeah, I'm providing the source code for the code that we had in the first previous week. All right, I see that everything is fine, and we can get started. But before that, let's have a look at our application the way we have it right now. So I have it here opened. Previous week I was working on a MacBook, but today I decided to work on my Windows machine because we're not going to focus too much on the UI. So yeah, it's going to be a bit easier for me to manage everything. But that's the good thing about React Native, is because the application that we are building will work the same both on iOS and on Android, and we have a possibility to develop this application both on macOS and on Windows. So as you can see here, this is the application that we have at the moment, and the main screen contains the list of chats that we have. At the moment, all of this is dummy data, and our goal for today is to integrate the backend and to query this data from the database. We can see at the top like the header title, which is a native title, and from here we can actually go to the contact list and see all the contacts that there are in the application, and from here we will be able to start chatting with them. Then when we press on a chat, we are entering the chat room, and here we can see a list of messages. We are displayed similar as in WhatsApp, and we're gonna be able to type some messages and send it like this. All right, and I think that's the application that we have at the moment, and this is what we are gonna work with. So, hello from Indonesia. Hello. So from the email that you received by downloading the asset bundle, you should receive here the URL to this guide. And here, if you scroll down a bit, we have the WhatsApp board. There is the to-do list with all the tasks, and there is the board that splits them into UI and backend. So today our goal is going to be to complete all of these 8 tasks that we have here. Starting with the prerequisites, here I provided for you a little bit more information about the prerequisites that you need, such as the Node.js, NPM, Git, which I think that you already have, because if you follow along so far, most probably you already have NPM and Node.js and also Git. If you don't, click here the links and check it out. Also, you will need an AWS account, which is free to create. However, yeah, they require the credit card to be attached right away. But don't worry, because AWS offers a free tier, a very generous free tier for new users. So you're not going to be charged for the things that we're going to build today. I cannot promise anything out of the scope of this tutorial. So in this tutorial, you're definitely not going to be charged. I have more than 25 applications on AWS and I'm not charged anything. So create your AWS account, and lastly, install the Amplify CLI using npm install -g at AWS Amplify CLI. And last step would be to configure your Amplify. If you're done with this, then we can get started and we can start creating our application. So I'm gonna open this up like this. So the first step that we have to do is to, of course, log in our AWS console to start working and creating our Amplify application. So I'm gonna click this URL. I'm going to log in real quick behind the camera. Give me 1 second. All right, and here is a reminder for you to set up multi-factor authentication for all your accounts. Okay, something is not working for me. Maybe I shouldn't type and talk. But that's the fun part. Yes, now we have it. And here is our... Okay, so after you sign in your AWS console, this is what you're supposed to see. First steps when you sign in is double check the region in which the AWS console is selected. All these regions are separate data center around the world, and the idea, the rule of thumb is to choose a region that is closest to your end users, or if this is a development project or a project for learning, then choose a region that is closer to you. So I'm gonna choose a region from Europe if I'm still allowed to start projects here. Let's see. And after that, in the search bar, let's search AWS Amplify here. Let's choose AWS Amplify. And from this page, of course, in your case, it should be a bit different. You should see a create application button in the middle. For me, I already have a couple of applications. So what I have to do is I have to press on the new application here, build application. Let's give it an application name, for example, what's up, and let's press confirm and deploy. The next step, this will take around 1 to 2 minutes, and Amplify will set up our project, and then we will be able to access it and take it from there. So while that is being done, how are you guys? Tell me something. Hi Vadim, nice content as always. Will be great if you can do a React Native WooCommerce integration one of these days. That's interesting. I don't know. We'll see. Don't have a lot of experience with WooCommerce, or how do you pronounce it? Hello, Pat. I think I'm gonna have to open the door because it's too hot here. Okay. Nice work. Thank you very much, Edu. Right, let's think these are the last steps until everything is deployed. So Amplify, for if you're not familiar with it, Amplify is a set of tools provided by AWS that makes it very easy for front-end and mobile developers to build full-stack applications. So as a service, Amplify is nothing new. Amplify is just a way to use the existing AWS services that are out there, but are too complicated and too technical for a lot of developers to get into that. So I already have like AWS certifications, so for me it makes a bit more sense, but at the beginning everything was kind of a mess with AWS. Everything is overcomplicated. There is so many services. There are more than 200 services at the moment, and they add services every day in order to support the growing industry of cloud computing. That's understandable, but at the same time, that became very complicated, and AWS team decided to create a tool that will simplify the entry point to these services. So today we're gonna see how easy it is to implement some of the things, and I'm gonna try to explain you what's behind the scenes of these tools. For example, when we implement authentication, we will have to write probably 3 lines of code, and we're gonna have everything. But at the same time, I'm gonna explain what's behind our authentication service and how we can check it in AWS. And yeah, because there are a lot of things going on behind the scenes. All right. So our project has been deployed, and this is what you should see. You should see here the staging environment, and what we have to do is simply press Launch Studio. Amplify Studio is a graphical user interface for our backend services. So before Amplify Studio, in order to create Amplify projects, we had to work only with CLI. Now you can also work with the CLI and create the projects there, but I think it's a bit more intuitive to work with Amplify Studio whenever that's possible, because there are things that we will have to do from the CLI as well. So here Amplify Studio, in the left menu, we see 3 topics: manage, we see design, and we see setup. For the, let's start from the bottom up. For the setup, here is where we are going to set up our backend resources. For example, here is where we're gonna set up the authentication, storage provider, data, and so on. In the design, that's not for us. Design is for React applications, and it allows you to convert Figma to React code. That's also something exciting, but that's not for React Native, at least for now. And manage is where we will manage the data of our application. For example, after launching our data, our database, from here we're going to simply manage our content, and we're going to see that throughout this tutorial. The same way we will manage users to see how many users are authenticated, how many of them like confirm their email and so on, and also managing files if you have them. So that's mostly everything about the Amplify Studio from a high-level perspective, but we're gonna get into these details, these specific details when we will implement these features. Now, the next step would be to pull the backend in our application, but I'm gonna jump a bit to the next task in order to save us a bit of time. In order not to have to pull the backend twice, let's go back to WhatsApp board and let's start working on the authentication. Because setting up authentication is super simple. The only thing that we have to do is we go here to the setup, we go to the authentication, and basically we press deploy. But let's see what are the things that we can configure here. First of all is we can configure the way user can log in, and there are multiple login mechanisms. For example, by default, we have enabled the email login mechanism, and when you're signing up with an email, you need a password as well. You can add additional, for example, signing in with phone number, signing in with Facebook, signing in with Google, Amazon, with Apple, and so on. So as you can see, there is a lot of options here, but I'm gonna keep it simple and I'm gonna keep only the default email sign-in because that's gonna help us simplify the sign-up flow and it will allow us to use some of the predefined user interface components from AWS Amplify React Native library. But it is also possible to add the phone number sign in, and in that situation, users will be able to sign in with phone number. For this, you'll have to adjust a bit the user interface, and it implies a little bit more work, but that's possible. So the next step is, here, multi-factor authentication. You can also enable or disable it. I'm gonna keep it disabled for now. And lastly, the configuring sign up. You can add additional fields that the user will be required to provide when he will create his account. But again, if we do that, we're gonna have to customly manage and create the user interface for these forms. And this is out of the scope for this tutorial. However, we are covering this in details in our course because we have the opportunity to get into these details and build custom forms with all of the data that we require here. Then we have password protection settings. Here you can choose the rules for your password. I'm gonna make it as easy as possible for me to sign in to simplify the sign-in process right now. This is not a production application, and for me that's fine. And lastly, you can also change the verification message setting. This is going to be the emails that you're going to receive to confirm your account. So with that being said, again, I'm going to leave everything by default, email login mechanism, and let's do deploy. The deployment will start right now, and in a moment we're gonna see what we have to do next. Junan, I have some doubts about has many belongs to and has one. Let me know specifically what's not clear. When we will get to the database and relationships, I'm gonna try to stop and explain these types of relationships. Let me not get into this at the moment because I'm gonna scare everyone with the technical terms. When we get to the relationships, I'm gonna get to that. Hello from Cambodia. Hello from China. Next, food delivery application, please. We have a very good tutorial for food delivery applications. We have done the Uber Eats clone, which is it's actually a 7-episode series. It's crazy, huge. And during that series, we're building 3 applications. We're building one application for the user side that allows users to order food. We have one application for the drivers that track their location, they can manage orders, they can pick up orders, deliver orders, and so on. And lastly, the third application there is the restaurant dashboard, which is a React.js application, a web application for restaurants to manage their orders, to manage their menu, and so on. So that's a huge project, a lot of value there, and it's completely for free. You can find it somewhere on the channel. If you have other ideas, guys, please let me know what projects you would like to see us build in the future. Didari saying, I'm here to thank you, Vadim. I'm about to finish my first project. Oh my god, that's so awesome. Thank you very much, and I appreciate your kind words. What projects are you finishing? So while things are being deployed, yeah, they are still being deployed. Let's go back in our task list here. I'll keep it like this. And let's go back to our create our Amplify application, because as I said, we haven't finished everything here. No. Oh, and our authentication has successfully been deployed, and right away it shows us what we have to do for the next steps. The next steps is to pull our backend application in our React Native project, and for that we're gonna copy this Amplify pull command, or if you don't see this page, you can check it out in the top right corner here. Deployment successful, you can press on it and then it's gonna show you this one. For example, yeah, let's do it like this. And let's bring it in our application. Let's open up a terminal. And here, let me think what I want to do here. Here, I'm going to create a new branch for our backend to keep everything organized. So yeah, let's open a terminal and paste the Amplify pull command that we copied from our dashboard there. Let's do that. This will open an Amplify page for the authentication. Press yes, and after that, just close that window. Let's go back here, and it will ask us a couple of questions to set it up specifically for our environment. For example, the first one is the editor, in my case, Visual Studio. Then the application is JavaScript. Come on, JavaScript. It's React Native. The source directory, we leave it by default. Just press enter, 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 enter. And do you plan on modifying this backend as well? Enter to choose yes. By doing that, we are gonna be able to see the backend locally as code. So we see that our backend has successfully been pulled in our application. And if we want to see what files and what changes did it create, we can do a git status here, and we see that we have the Amplify folder. So if we look at the Amplify folder, here is where all the code for our backend is. At the moment, we have an authentication folder, and this contains information about our authentication. Usually, we don't have to get into these details a lot, except managing our schema, but that's for a bit later in this tutorial. Now, yeah, there is nothing interesting there at this moment. What's interesting is in the source directory, we already see a AWS exports file. This AWS exports file is the configuration that tells Amplify how to connect with specifically our backend, because there are millions of Amplify projects out there, but it needs to know what are the IDs of our resources. So this file is auto-generated by Amplify, and it will allow us to configure Amplify. To configure Amplify, we will have to first install all the dependencies. I have prepared them for you here. So let's go ahead and copy them from here. And going back in our application, let's install these dependencies. So I think I made a mistake there. I don't really like it. What's going on here? Let me open a new terminal. And I'm gonna try to do it again. Yes, so we need to install AWS Amplify. We need to install AWS Amplify React Native that will provide us a couple of React Native built-in components that will simplify our development, and a couple of other dependencies that Amplify depends on. I don't know anything about AWS Amplify, what to do? To follow this build and to learn about AWS Amplify, and the best way to learn something new is, of course, to build something, to build an application with it. So this is your opportunity to learn about AWS, and I'm pretty sure you will love it. So after the dependencies are installed, we have to set up our Amplify project in our application here. So what do we have to do for that? Let me grab everything like this. I'm gonna make it a bit smaller. Yeah, so what do we have to do in order to configure Amplify in our application is to open the entry file app.js. And from here, we need to import a couple of things. The first thing is we will import Amplify from AWS Amplify. Then we're going to import the file that I just showed you in the source AWS exports. This is the configuration. So we will import AWS config from the source directory and then AWS exports. Make sure that this AWS exports file is in the source directory, because if it's not, it might also be in the root directory. And in that case, you would have to remove the here source when importing it. But for me, it's in the source, so I'm gonna leave it like this. Now, having Amplify and having the configuration for it, we're gonna simply put it together like this: amplify.configure AWS config. And that's it, we configured our Amplify. If we refresh the application, nothing should change because we simply configure Amplify. And if we don't see any errors, that means that everything is good. However, I expect to see an error, to be honest. But we'll see. Yeah, maybe in the next. Let me try to restart the server. I want to see a warning and show you how to solve it. Okay, let's open it on Android. Rogelio, hello. Okay, I still don't see anything, but we're gonna see that error in a moment, so I'm gonna show you how to fix it. All right, so we have configured Amplify, and with that, we are done with the first steps to create and configure our backend. Now let's finish our authentication, because we have set it up in the cloud, but we still have to implement it in our application. To implement the basic authentication that is provided by AWS Amplify is super simple. The only thing that we have to do is we have to import, also in app.js, we have to import a function called with authenticator. We're going to import it from AWS Amplify React Native. So a simple rule of thumb, if something is related to user interface, then it should come from AWS Amplify React Native. Otherwise, it will come from AWS Amplify. So because our authenticator works with user interfaces, we're importing it from here. Now we need to wrap our application inside this with authenticator. And what do I mean by that? Well, let's first of all, instead of exporting by default the application right away here, let's remove this export default. Let's define firstly the application, and at the end of the file, let's export default application. Now, what I said before makes a bit more sense. We have to wrap our application inside with authenticator. To do that, we simply say with authenticator, and then we put our application as a parameter to this function. And if I save and refresh my application, then we should see our authenticating screens, auth screens. And here it is. That's it. That's everything we had to do in order to have proper authentication set up in our application. And we see here the sign-in screen, but that's not everything that it got. For example, there is a sign up screen, and we're gonna start by signing up. Sorry. This is the form that I was talking about that we get by default from with Authenticator. And yes, there are possibilities on how you can adjust everything about this form, including like the fields, the colors, the styling, and so on. And to do that, by doing that, yeah, like you can provide like proper field names, because here you'll see that not all the fields make a lot of sense. For example, username here, you'd expect to put something like a username, but no, here it expects an email. So I'm gonna add my email, because this is the authentication method that we chose in Amplify. If you remember, we chose email login. If you had here phone login, then in this field you'd put the phone number. Then for the password, that's pretty clear. I'm gonna do a simple password. For the email, we're gonna repeat our email. That's why I said that it's not very optimal, this form, but it gets its job done. And for phone number, it's required, but we can put anything here, and then we can press sign up. After that, we are redirected to the confirm sign up page, and we should put the confirmation code that we receive on our email. Let me check the email. Come on. Oh, I made a mistake. So I'm gonna go back to sign in because it's a different email. Let's do it like this. Sign up. And why is it still Gmail? Let's see if I received it. Yes, I already received it on email. 516, let's confirm, and we are back to the sign-in screen. Now, after we confirmed our email, we are allowed to sign in with that account. So let's do that right now. And after I press sign in, we are back in our application. We are signed in, we created our account, and the next time we will open the application, we'll not be asked again to sign in. Because all of this token synchronization, updating these tokens and so on, all of this is taken care by Amplify behind the scenes. And yeah, that's how you implement authentication. Now, you might ask, okay, let me do one more thing. For this authentication, look what I want to do. I want to show you how you can sign out of an account, because I think that's quite important and might be a bit confusing for some people. So to sign out, actually the challenge is where to put the button. Probably I'm gonna put it somewhere in the settings. And let me create the screen for the settings that will simply have one button, sign out. So this is gonna be settings screen.js. here let's generate real quick the component, and let's do sign out, and not text but button to have a bit of styles. This is title sign out, and some styles for this one. Flex 1, justify content center, and align items center, just to have a button in the middle. Now let's go ahead in our navigation. In the main tab navigator, let's first of all import our screen at the top, settings screen, and let's replace the tab that has the name settings instead of not implemented with the settings screen. Now I see the button sign out in the middle. If I press, nothing happens, but let me show you how we can sign out. So to interact with the authentication module, all we have to do is we have to import auth from AWS Amplify. Now using this auth object, we can interact with the authentication and we can do a lot of things. For example, in our case, when we press on this button, let's do on press. What I want to do is I want to call auth.signout. And as simple as that, if I press sign out here, I'm redirected to the sign in screen. And if I refresh the application, I will be again like redirected to the sign in screen because it cleared all the tokens, all the cache, and so on. And here we have a possibility to log in again. So one more thing. The next question you might have is whether we are able to adjust like these screens, because it's nice to have all of this user interface by default, and I think it's very useful for a lot of applications, especially in the early stage when your authentication screens are not the most important part of your business, of your mobile application. In that case, you can implement everything like as you saw, like in 5 or 10 minutes, and focus your energy on building features that will add value to the application. However, in a lot of situations, when you are past that stage where the focus is on the main features, and you also have to think about like edge cases and edge screens like authentication and onboarding and so on. In that cases, it's possible to adjust everything about these authentication screens. And there are two levels actually on how you can adjust things. One level is still using this with authenticator that will manage like all the navigation between screens and so on. We can pass here some options that will specify our theme. And by doing that, we can adjust the colors, we can adjust like border radius, background color, like everything when it comes to the styling. When it comes to the layout, we don't have a lot of control there, but still with these layouts, by adding some styles, you can make these screens match your design very easily. We can also, with authenticator, adjust the fields that we ask the user here in the create new account. And by doing that, like you can optimize a bit like these fields, because you don't need a username and email, you only need one field here, and probably also don't need a phone number if that's the case. The second level of of flexibility is building all of these screens yourself and simply calling them API methods similar to how we call the authentication sign out. Because all of the methods that we have here, for example, sign up, for example, sign in, all of these methods, we can call them directly on the authentication module. And if you check here, have a look, sign in, and here what you have to do, it will even say, okay, you need to pass here username, and then the password. So here, for example, I don't know, you'll put the email and then the password, which of course you're gonna get from state. And auth sign in will either return an error or will actually return the tokens, and you will be able to allow the user in your application. So with that being said, I just wanted to point out that sky is the limit in terms of flexibility here, and it covers all the use cases from the most lazy one that we have done today with simply wrapping with Authenticator to the most flexible one or most do-it-yourself way to build everything yourself and integrate with the Auth API. We're covering all of these adjustments using that with Authenticator styling and also with custom screens. We're covering that in our private course that you can check it out following the description below. You can join the waitlist because soon we're gonna enroll a new batch of users, a new batch of students. And also we have some content around authentication screens on YouTube, and I have provided it here. So you can check it out, these tutorials. With that being said, we are done with authentication, and let me actually sign in back in the application. Not down. Okay. Sign in. Yes, here we have it. And yeah, this is the error that I was telling you about. You should see a promise unhandled rejection. Don't worry, that's nothing critical. It's not gonna crash your application. But if you're a perfectionist and want to get rid of that, to do that, where we configure Amplify, we have to disable analytics. So to do that, put this AWS config into an object, destructure it, close this object at the end, and provide here analytics, which is going to be an object for the configuration, and disabled equal true. And by doing that, we disable analytics, and we're going to get rid of that error that was triggered by this analytics, which we didn't actually enable yet. So I don't know why it happens. So with that being said, I think we can go ahead and commit everything for the backend authentication, creating application, and so on. So let's do git add everything backend to authentication. All right. And our next step would be to start working on our data model. Guys, how is it going? Are you following along? Do you have any questions when it comes to authentication? Please do a multi-role authentication application. That's a good topic. That's something that we should cover. Because with Amplify, you can provide different groups, different roles for users. So you can have a role for administrator, a role for user, a role for... Okay. Darshak, thank you very much. So, moving on. The next step is to start working on our database model. So before we start working on the database model, let's quickly think about what data do we need in the application. And a good example would be to check out our dummy data that we can find in the assets data. And here we have chats. And this data provides the data for this screen, a screen of chats. And the messages provides data for our messages here. So if we look here, we see that, well, we have some information about users like name and image and status in order to display status here. We have some information about a message. So a message actually here makes more sense. A message will have an ID, it will have a text of the actual message, it will have some timestamps like created at, and also it will have a relationship with a user. So out of these things, we can kind of understand what information we will need. So let's start by probably designing the user, because that's the most straightforward one. So for that, let's go ahead and in our Amplify backend here. And under the setup, let's open the data tab. Here, we can press on the add model to add our first model. The first model will be our user, and it automatically comes with an ID. After ID, we also need the name of a user, which is going to be a string. And if you want this field to be required, we can check it out here, is required, and that will add the question mark at the end of a string. This is coming from GraphQL, and whenever you see the type name with a question mark, that means that this field is required. Then we have a status. I don't think the status is required, maybe not. And also an URL to an image, which is going to be a string. And as well, I will not make it required. Maybe some users don't want to upload a picture. Okay, that's good. What else do we need about the user? That's it. I think that's everything. Now, the next step, probably also not very complicated, is going to be our message model. So a message will have the text that you want to send, and this text is required. Text, what else? If we look in the messages, it has ID, text, it has a created at, but the cool thing about Amplify is that it will automatically add some additional fields, including the created at, so we don't have to specify it separately. We can leave it like this. And here it has a user. But this is a relationship, so I'm gonna talk about the relationships in a moment. About the messages, yeah, I think that's everything that it has. It needs a text message. Now, where will these messages be sent? Well, these messages will be sent in the chat rooms. Basically, a chat room, let's consider a chat room a group of 2 or even more people that can communicate between each other. So basically, our list here of chats are our chat rooms, the rooms in which people can exchange messages. So let's go ahead and create this chat room. Let's call it chat room. And for the data, if we look here at the chats, besides relationship to a user and relationship to a last message, it doesn't have anything else. And that's okay, that's fine, because chat room will mostly serve for us as a relationship table for our rooms. In future, a property of a chat room might be, I don't know, let's say, who is the admin, and yeah, I cannot think of other interesting things. Or maybe like the background image, if every chat room has a separate background image. That also might be a feature. Now let's get to our relationships, because with the data we are done, we are clear. But now about messages. So starting with a message. No, starting with a chat room. A chat room will have a list of messages, right? Because when we open a chat room, this is a list of messages in that chat room. So let's go ahead and add a relationship with the message. And here we have a couple of options. One chat room to one message. In this case, if we want the chat room to have only one message, that's the relationship you want to go. But in our case, we want our chat room to have many messages. So one chat room has a lot of messages, but one message can belong only to one chat room. because the same message you cannot send to multiple chat rooms. And even if you would like to do that feature, like sending to multiple users at the same time, those will be technically separate messages attached to different chat rooms. Here we can also provide the relationship name, which will help us query the data in our application, but I'm gonna leave it as default. If I press save here, we see the relationship name added under the chat room, but if we look at the message table, we see a new property here that is coming from a relationship. This property is chat room ID, and this is actually how we design one-to-many relationships. So for the side where we have like many is our messages, we simply add an ID that points to one specific chat room. And by having that, we create this relationship and we will be able to query the messages from here. The same way as a message has a chat room ID, we want a message to have a user ID to know who is sending that message. Well, let's do the same. Let's go to the users. Let's add a relationship to message, and one user can send multiple messages, right? Yes. Let's do that, and here we have user ID in the message automatically added. Okay, okay, all right. Let's see what are other things that we need in terms of relationships. Message, chat room, okay. Now let's talk about the relationship between a chat room and a user. So when thinking about like cardinality, like is it a one-to-one, one-to-many, many-to-many, we should ask the question. Let me try to, I will not be able to bring it down, or will I? No, I'm not gonna be able, but that's okay. I can do it like this. Okay, so the relationship between a chat room and a user. Let's ask, how many users can a chat room have? Well, a chat room can have at least 2 users, but it can also be a group chat room where we have multiple users. So one chat room has multiple users. Now let's reverse this question and ask, how many chat room can a user participate in? Well, the user can have multiple chat rooms as well, because here I'm talking with Elon Musk, here I'm talking with Adrian, here I'm talking with Borja, and all of them are different chat rooms, but the user is the same. I am the user being part of multiple chat rooms. That means that we have many chat rooms to many users. To design this relationship here, Amplify provides us with a many-to-many relationship. So from the user, I'm gonna create a relationship to the chat room as a many-to-many relationship. We are gonna save this. And if you know some SQL or database modeling, you might think that, well, this is weird because many-to-many relationships, for that we need a pivot table in between that will connect them together. And the interesting thing is that Amplify will automatically create for us this pivot table that will allow us to have this many-to-many relationship. So now we have here chat rooms. We have here in the chat room messages. What else? What else? Lastly, as you can see in our application, we will have one feature that when displaying a list of chat rooms, these are list of chat rooms, we also display what was the last message in that chat room. So to design that, we're gonna have to define a relationship between a chat room and a message that will hold the information about what was the last message. So if I do message here, one chat room to one message, and if I call it last message, let's see, save. Yes. Last message, 1 to 1. Perfect. Let's double check if we have everything. So for the message ID, text is string, and we have 2 relationship sources. For the chat room, we have simply ID and free relationships, messages one to many, users many to many, last message 1 to 1. And lastly, for the user, we have ID, name, image, status, and relationship for the chat rooms and messages. Chat rooms and messages. Awesome. So with this data model, I think we will be ready to have a lot of functionality in our application. It's quite simple, but it will allow us to do a lot in the coding. So let's press save and deploy here. And press deploy to deploy our backend data. Matthias, hello. Following along, can we add logo on the first screen, or we need to build custom screens for that? Logo for the authentication screens, to be honest, I'm not sure about that. When it comes to the layout, as far as I know, you cannot adjust a lot of things, but logo is such a common use case that I would expect it to be available to be able to define it. But yeah, I would have to go through the documentation to check that out. Matthias, how is the course going? Joshua, hello, used your Uber clone tutorial to build my startup. Completely grateful. Oh my God, that's so nice. I'm so happy when people start with a tutorial and then work on it and extend its functionality, extend its features, and actually create and deploy an application out of them. That's the end goal. One thing though, Lambda Cognito Sync was difficult. Lambda Cognito, yeah. This is something that I'm always struggling with simplifying this thing, because yeah, like it makes sense, but to go into that Lambda, like I would have to explain a lot of topics. What is Lambda functions? What are the event triggers? How does it work? How to give access from a Lambda to a DynamoDB table directly? How to write directly in DynamoDB, which is not the most developer-friendly API. And yeah, like doing it one time, I always look back at some of my examples where I previously have done that. But yeah, like explaining that is quite difficult. And I would really love to see a way Amplify to synchronize authentication users with database users. And for everyone else listening, we're gonna see this problem in a moment and we're gonna solve it. But yeah, like it's still not the best developer experience there. Right. Matthias is saying course is going great, finishing the API module. That's awesome. Great. The next one is interesting. After API, after API we have storage, and then we have like setting up the deployment, the production environment and deploying and CI/CD. Tuan, you are welcome. Hola amigo. Hola Estuardo. ¿Cómo estás? Okay, we're waiting for our database model to be deployed to Amplify, and then we're gonna continue integrating it in our application. In the future, will you be able to update the Tinder clone with a chat option? I would be able to do that, but I'm not sure if that's going to be our priority. what I recommend you doing, and that's gonna be a very good like practice exercise for you, and I don't think it's gonna be very complicated, is to merge two tutorials together. So if you're following the Tinder clone and you want to add chatting application, then follow this clone of WhatsApp and see what are the functionalities we build here and build them in your project that you started in the Tinder clone. And these are going to be like the same functionality, only like different screens, like you'll put them in a different navigation screen. Probably the main page is not going to be this one, but it's going to be your Tinder page. And when you go to the chats, that's what you're going to see. So I think that's going to be like a very good exercise for you to see how you can, to see if you understand actually the topic and if you can adjust it for your own specific needs. Right. Taking a bit of time to deploy because deploying an API, actually a lot of things are happening behind the scenes. So for every model that we created, and we created 3 of them, and actually they are 4 behind the scenes. One of them is the users, the chat rooms, then the messages, and also the chat room users, the table that connects them together. So for every 4 models that we have, Amplify will go ahead and create 4 DynamoDB tables to serve as our database. DynamoDB is a very, very performant database, and you know, like when you have some advantages, you have to sacrifice some other things. And for DynamoDB, that's a bit on the how easy it is to work with a DynamoDB. And I will tell you that's not very easy to manually work with DynamoDB. There are a lot of new things there that are not similar to other SQL databases that you might be familiar with. There are some things that are not working as easy as you would expect, like counting things is not that straightforward with DynamoDB. But all of these downsides are with a reason. All of these downsides are there in order to provide a very performant database that will, if used correctly, will give you like under milliseconds performance for any size of your data. So a lot of big companies are using DynamoDB behind the scenes just for this reason, for the performance. And actually, after you have some experience with it, it makes it, it becomes a bit easier. So yeah, like as I said, like for every model, we have a DynamoDB database, and then we have our AppSync, which defines and creates our GraphQL API. And in the AppSync, Amplify automatically creates all the operations that we need, all the queries and mutations and subscription that we need for every single model. In order for us to have CRUD operation out of the box, to create a user, to read a user, update a user, delete a user, and all of these operations for everything. Now, I'm gonna, like, throughout the tutorial, I'm gonna still like talk about how it works behind the scenes. We're gonna still see some queries, how to run, how to see the AppSync, DynamoDB. But for now, let's go ahead and pull the changes in our application to get them, yeah, like to get this data model in our application. So I'm gonna close this one here, and yeah, let's do git pull our application ID and the environment name staging. That will fetch our data, but while it is being fetched, we can go back to our Amplify Studio. Let's press done here. And now that we have defined the data model, we can go into the manage content, and we can start managing our content from here right away. And this is another benefit of Amplify Studio, because it gives you a CMS, a content management system out of the box that you can use to manage the data in your application without having to develop some dashboards yourself. For example, here we can select the table that we want to look into, and I'm gonna check the user table. And let's go ahead and auto-generate some data here. Let's try to generate, 10 users, and let's seed, for example, for the name, that's gonna be a full name. And for the status, that's gonna be a sentence length. And for the image, we don't need actually an image. So let's generate some data here. It actually added some dummy words for our image, and this will make it, we will not see any images there, but that's okay for the demonstration purposes. So right away, we have some data to work with. We have a list of users. Now, yes. Now let's see how we can interact with our API. And as I said, our API is a GraphQL API. And let's go ahead in the setup here and let's open GraphQL API. Here we see the resource name, and we can click on this resource name to open our AppSync that is responsible for our Amplify. So here we see the AWS AppSync page for our GraphQL API. You can look and play around here. For example, like we can check the schema, and the schema is how our basically all the models, all the mutations, and all the queries that we can run on our API. So here you can see that Amplify generated for us like 600 lines of code for our schema to simply define it. So this is work that normally you'd have to write, but here Amplify takes care of it. What's interesting here is not of the schema, is actually the queries, because here under the queries we can interact with our API. For example, let's see, these are all our queries. We selected them from the top, and we see that we have a couple of queries. What I'm interested in is in the query list users. Let's click on it, and under items, let's open the items, select the fields that you want to receive. For example, ID, name, and image, and also maybe create that. And if we run this query, we will see the response: data, list users, items, and items is an array with all the users that we just generated here in our console in the content. So we see the name, ID, and so on. This is the power of GraphQL is that it allows us from the front end, basically when we query the data, it allows us to specify what data specifically we need. Because if you compare it with a REST API, when you query some data from a REST API, it will send you everything that it knows. For example, if you query the post, it will send you everything about the post. In this situation, we can specifically choose the fields that we want to query. And if, for example, on a page where we don't need a lot of information, for example, on this page, we only need image, name, and status, then we can remove created at. And on this page to query only these fields. Another thing is the relationships, but for them, I think I'm gonna talk about them a bit later. So now we see here how we can run a query to list all the users in the application. And the next step would be to actually run this query in our application. Let's go ahead in our application here. We see that everything was pulled successfully. Our API is created, and we, from the new things, we see the models here when it comes to working with the API, there are a couple of ways to do that. One way would be to use data store, which is a library developed by Amplify that helps us cache data offline and also interact with our API to sync the data from locally to remote data. the data store is really great for small applications, but I think when the application grows, like you get into some edge cases that are really complicated to work around it. So that's why today we're gonna work with a GraphQL client provided by AWS Amplify. It's a very thin client. It doesn't do much except querying the data, but it will get its job done for this project. The next step for you would be to use other GraphQL clients, for example, Apollo. And in the course, we're teaching Apollo that allows us, besides interacting with our GraphQL API, like querying and so on, it also serves as a caching mechanism, and it automatically caches the information locally, so it improves a lot the performance. It also helps a lot with keeping the data in sync in your application across like different screens, across different features. So if you have time, definitely look into Apollo, but for now, we're gonna work with the GraphQL client provided by Amplify. It's quite simple and it gets its job done. But for that, we need to generate some queries because, yeah, we can write all of these queries ourselves, but if Amplify can help us with that, we're gonna take advantage of that. So for that, I'm gonna clear my screen and let's do Amplify code gen add. Let's add the code gen that will help us create the queries. Let's choose JavaScript. Let's keep the same file name. Do you want to generate all? Yes. And for the depth, let's go with a depth of 3, just to make sure that we have enough data to work with today. And later on, I'm going to show you how you can adjust and improve these queries. So that means that Amplify generated our GraphQL operations and they are in the source GraphQL. Let's have a look. Source GraphQL. Here we have 3 files. Queries. And the queries, as you can see, are all of the queries that we saw available on the website. Get chat room, get messages, get users, and so on. They come already built with the fields to get to query, and the advantage of going with these GraphQL queries is that we can start using them right away without having to write them. The disadvantage is that, like the fields, basically it queries all the fields, and usually you don't need all the fields. So as the next step would be to write your own queries. For now, we can work with these queries because they are pretty okay for our use case. So let's scroll down until we see the list users query. Here it is. And as you can see, this list user queries will return our items, and for every user, it will have an ID, a name, a status, a list of messages, chat rooms, and so on. Yeah. Okay. So what does that mean? That means that we can go ahead in our screens, in the contacts screen, and instead of taking the data from the dummy data to display these contacts here, as you can see, we want to query these contacts. So to query the data, we need to import a couple of things. We're going to import something from AWS Amplify. And what we have to import here is the API module and also the GraphQL operation. Now we need to import the GraphQL query that we saw here, this list users query. So let's go ahead here and do import list users from one directory up, then GraphQL, then queries. Now, having this information, having this here, we will be able to query them users, but we need to, first of all, store them somewhere. So for that, we need a use state. use state from React. And also we need to run this query when the component mounts. So to do that, use effect will help. Now, let's go ahead and define our, let's start with, defining our state for the users. Set users equal use state, and initially it's going to be empty array. Now we can replace this flat list, the data for the flat list, to come from the users instead from the chats. And now we don't need the chats and we can easily remove them. We don't see anything because we haven't queried it yet. We initialize it with empty array. To query it, let's define the use effect because we want to query the data when the component mounts. And for that, we will provide the empty dependency array here. Now, using the API module, let's do API dot. Then we have to access the type of API that you have, either a REST API or a GraphQL. In our case, that's a GraphQL API. And inside this, as a parameter, we're going to send the GraphQL operation. And the GraphQL operation will receive a parameter. Specifically, what operation we want to run. We want to run list users. And after this API.GraphQL resolves, it's an asynchronous function. So for that, we will do a .then. And the result here, let's do result. Let's simply console log result. Let's do that. And let's open the here. And if I go to the context, I see data. I see an object which has data. Then inside that object, we have list users. Then we have items, which is an array of items. So that means that our users are in the response.data.listusers.items. Okay, perfect. So knowing that, we can set users by specifying result.data.listusers.items. And as you can see, I always accessed the next property safely, because if some error happens, data will be undefined and this will return an error if we don't have a question mark. Now, if I go here, undefined is not an object evaluating user.image. Let's have a look at the list of users. So let's do console log. The thing is that here we are accessing item.user. Now we simply have to access the item because our array contains an array of users, not an array of chat rooms or something like that. So now if I open it, all right, and right away I see users with their name and the status. We don't see any images because, let me first copy one image from here, from the data chats, for example, this one. As I said, we don't have any images because if we look at our data, our automatically generated information doesn't have a proper image. So that's why we see it like this. But if we're gonna update it with a proper URL and do save user and then refresh our application here, one of the users there will have the photo. Yes, it's the first one and we see it right away there. I'm gonna go ahead and see if I can simply fix the issue with text going outside the screen. I think I will be able, because I simply have to say username here, the chat subtitle, I don't know, with 100%. Will it work? Doesn't work. This is chat list. No, I don't have to do it in the chat list item. Sorry. Let's go to the contact list item. Contact list item has a username and a text here. And the text subtitle. Align self stretch. Oh my god. Wait a second. We have this content. Okay, content. Where is the content style? Content style needs a flex 1. And now it works better. All right, so with that being said, we saw what's the most important for now, how to query the information from our database. We use the API.GraphQL to access specifically the GraphQL because we also have a REST API. And to this function GraphQL, we send a GraphQL operation with the query that we want to send. This query we imported from the automatically generated queries that we can see here in the source GraphQL queries that was generated by Amplify, and that gave us this possibility to query the users and render them here. Perfect. So with the third task for the data model, we are finished, and we can go ahead and do git add, git commit, backend free data model. Okay, perfect. And we can go to the next one, backend for the users. And here we will have to manage our users. We already saw the first query to get the users here. And yeah, we have to implement other stuff in a moment. Okay. Hello, Moses. How are you doing? Thank you very much. Okay, now let me try to explain the issue that I was discussing a bit before when it comes to authentication users and database users. And what do I mean by that? Well, when we signed up here, sign up, the information about this user, like the username, password, email, and so on, this information is managed by the AWS Cognito service, which is responsible behind the scenes of the authentication. To see that, we can simply go to... I don't think I have to go there to show you, but yeah, like if we go to the users management here, we see that we have two users here. One of them is confirmed, one of them is the one unconfirmed that I failed to, I made a mistake. So as you can see, users, authentication users are managed by Cognito service, and these users are different than the users from our database. The users, come on. The users from our database. I don't see here any users with my account. Well, while the authentication users are of course responsible for authenticating you in, authorizing you, making sure you are the person who you are saying to be, managing the password and so on. Well, sometimes, and by sometimes I mean most of the times, the data that we have will have some relationships to a user. For example, in our application, we needed relationship between a message and a user. To define this relationship, we need to define the user as a model in our database. We need information about that user in our database. Now, the problem is that we have two sources of truth for our users. One of them is here in the user management, and I see here two users, and another source of truth is in our database, which I'm going to refer to as database user, and the other one, authentication user. Because we have two sources of truth, we need a way to somehow merge them together, or at least connect them logically together. Connecting them logically together, we're going to be able to do that by automatically creating a database user every time someone signs up. Basically, every time an authentication user is created here, we need to go ahead and duplicate, not everything, but duplicate the information about that user in our database in order later to be able to search for that user, to add him to a chat room, to send messages, and so on. How we're gonna merge them together, based on what field? Well, we can do it on email if that's unique value. But what I like about a user in our authentication is that it has this sub ID. This subject ID is a unique identifier of a user incognito, and it will remain the same for the whole lifecycle of a user in your authentication. This is not going to change, so it's safe to use this ID as the ID of our user in our database, and that way we're going to be able to match and merge them together. So we're going to get the authentication user, we're going to get his ID, and then we're going to query information about the user from the database using that ID. So I think that that was pretty, hopefully that was pretty clear. And now we need to implement that. And this is the challenge that I was talking about, because implementing this, creating the user in the database automatically when a user is signed in with the cognito, with our authentication, doing it automatically is possible, but it involves a lot of moving parts. For that, we would need to create a Lambda function that will be triggered by cognito. That's not very complicated to do. And then cognito will trigger this Lambda function every time someone signs up. And we, in the Lambda function, can get this data and write it directly to DynamoDB. To write it directly to DynamoDB, that's a bit complicated. And then we have to think about permissions. And yeah, to get into that, which is the right way to approach this problem, would require me to explain a lot of other stuff which is outside the scope of this project. What we can do is we can have on the front end, we can manage this information on the front end. Basically, every time we log in the application, we will do a couple of operations to understand if the user signs up for the first time or not. Firstly, we will get the authentication user. We will know his sub ID, because every authenticated user has that sub, which is the unique identifier of a user. Based on that ID, we will query the database to check if there is a user with that ID. And if there is no user with that ID, that means that this is the first time the user joins the application. And that means that we have to save the information in the database. And the next time we will check if it's in the database and it's going to be there, and we will not do anything. So this is actually a bit hacky, but it's very efficient, it's quite a good solution for a lot of applications. So let's go ahead in our application and think what we have to do here. all of this logic will happen as soon as possible. And as soon as possible, I mean probably here in the app.js. In the app.js, when the application mounts, we're going to have a use effect. Use effect. And remember that our application will mount only after the user signs in. Before the user signs in, the application will not be mounted. Something else from the authenticator will be mounted. So that means that if application mounted, that means that the user is authenticated. So let's do here const fetch, or let's do sync user. That's going to be an async function. And we can call it here sync user. What do we have to do in this sync user? As I said, get the authentication user, then query the database using auth user ID, or yeah, like it's going to be called sub. If there is no users in database, create one. Otherwise, do nothing. So let's see how to do all of these steps. Getting the authentication user, for that we're gonna need to import authentication. Oh, actually I have already here Amplify, so I can import auth here. So getting the auth user is, yeah, let's do auth user equal await. We're gonna use the authentication module dot current authenticated user. And we also can provide here some params like bypass cache to make sure that this call will not use the cache and will actually do a query to our authentication. And if it's quite important, like probably we should bypass the cache. Let's go ahead and console log our auth user. For that, I'm gonna have to, of course, sign in to mount the application. notjust.dev, and here password. And if I look here, we have it. Okay, so here is our authentication user. So there is a lot of stuff here, but if I take it and put into a JSON formatter, we see that our authentication user has a session. It has some attributes that are the email, phone number, the subject. This is the thing that we're interested in. It's in the authUser.attributes.subject. Then a lot of other things that that manages like the tokens and so on. Okay. So we saw that we need the attributes, then subject. The next step is to query our database using the authentication user ID. Okay, we can do that. Let's go ahead and import our API. Let's import our GraphQL operation. And also let's see what actual GraphQL query we will need. So from the queries, instead of getting the list users that will get us all the users, we need one specific user. So that function should be called getUser. Yes, getUser, which expects one ID, and it will try to get us the user with that specific ID. Okay, so let's import getUser from source, then GraphQL, then queries. Okay, let's go ahead and try to get the users. So const user data equal await API, not app, but API dot GraphQL. Then, as you remember, we need to provide here a GraphQL operation. And what operation? We need to get the user. But that's not it, because we need one more parameter for the variables. And the parameters here is going to be id is equal to auth user dot attributes dot sub. That's the ID of our user, right? Now let's go ahead and console log our user data. Let's console log our user data. Let's refresh. Okay, something is not working. I'm gonna stop and restart the server. npm start. And reload. And right away we see here data get user null. That means that our user with this ID is not in the database. And yes, that's true, because this user is not yet in the database. Okay, the next step is if there is no user in database. So if user data dot how is it? User data dot usually it goes like this: the response.data, then the name of the query. And the name of the query is get user. So if this, let's do it like this. If this exists, then I'm gonna return, I'm gonna stop it here, and I can also do a console log user already exists in database. Otherwise, we are gonna go here and we have to create a user in the database. Okay, to create a user, now we get into mutations. So a query in GraphQL is something that allows us to get data from the database, and a mutation is something that allows us to update data in our backend. That includes adding new data, like inserting things, or updating it or deleting it. So everything that changes our data is a mutation. Everything that simply retrieves the information is a query. As simple as that. Both of them work kind of similar in a similar way. It also has like these inputs that we can send. And let's see how we can work with it. So we actually need a create user. So let's simply search create user. Here is our create user, and it expects an input for the data about this user. Okay, let's import create user from the source GraphQL and then mutations. Okay, so const new user response. Let's go ahead and call our API.GraphQL. We again need a GraphQL operation, and that GraphQL operation is our mutation. So it's create user. And for the second one, we have our variables. Then we have our input. And for the input, we need to send the data that we need for the user. So I'm gonna call it new user, and we can define it here to be more clear. Something like that. All right, now for the new user, let's think what are the required fields that we need to send there. An easy way to see those fields. Hope that everything is okay with the stream quality. Yeah. To get the information that we have to provide, one easy way would be to go to the AppSync here. Let's choose a mutation from here. And that added mutation. Let's press plus. That added a mutation here on the bottom. Let's do create user. And as you can see, there is this input field, which is input variable, which is required. And in the input, we have, for example, the name is required. We have ID, image, and what? Status. Version we don't need to provide, that's going to be taken care for us. So yeah, these are the 4 fields: ID, image, name, status. ID, something, then name, something, then image, something, and then status. So for the ID, it's very important here because for the ID, we need to provide this authentication user sub, because as I explained before, this is how we map one database user with one authentication user. And by providing this ID here as the sub, we're going to be able to query, as you can see here, the users based on this sub. For the name, here I don't have a very good solution because we don't have that name in our Cognito profile. And I can go ahead and display, you can display from the attributes email, or also you can display in the phone. I expect that nobody will put their real phone here, so I think it's better to display the phone for my application, because we want to test it at the end of this video, so I don't want to expose the emails of everyone. Or you can put here like a random name, like placeholder, and let the user update it later. That's also possible. But I'm gonna do attributes phone. I'm wondering if it's phone or phone number. Phone number, like this. Phone number. Okay, for the image, I'm not gonna provide any image. The user will be able to update it later. For the status, we can provide, similar to how WhatsApp is using, like a default status. Hey, I am using WhatsApp. That's it. Let's refresh and we already see possible and handle promise rejection. If we look at this here, what's the problem? Possible rejection, data errors, message. Variable input has null value for type create user input. Variable input, new user. If I do here console log new user, I want to see what new user we have there. We have ID, name, and status. Yeah, everything is fine. Wait a second, what's the issue here? Variables, input, new user, create. Might be without variables, just input. Might be. Yes, now we didn't see any errors. And if I go ahead and run this list users, let's try to run this query. We're gonna see that besides all of these generated users, I'll see the last one, not the last one, this one, that is the user that I just created. And if I get the status, you will see that it's actually the user that I created here. Hey, I'm using WhatsApp. I showed it to you here, but you can also see it in the content here, automatically updated and added here with a name, with a status, and without any image. Now we should also test this part. We should test if we stop the execution of adding things to our database if the user is already there. So if I sign in the second time, this time the user should be found in the database and it shouldn't be created one more time. And we can see here user already exists in database. Perfect. And with that being said, we have implemented this functionality of syncing, of syncing a database user with authentication user. So to recap what we did here, when we launch the application, and because our application is wrapped with authenticator, that means that here the user will be authenticated. And when we launch this application, we need to get the information about the authenticated user. Based on that information, we need to query our database and we need to check if we already have this user in our database. And if we don't have that, we need to create the user and we need to send it to our API using the GraphQL to save it there. And the second time our user will open the application, the flow will stop at this if statement, because at the second time our API here, when we query based on the ID, it will return us the user from the database and we will stop here. So yeah, we queried the user, we create user on first sign in. We can also provide like some random avatars, but I think that's not very important. And we connected our authentication user with our API user. And now we're going to be able to create messages and link them to this user, and everything is going to be working fine. All right, so with that being said, we are done with this B for users. So let's go ahead and do git add, git commit -m be for users, like this. And our next task is going to be chat rooms. So we need to create a chat room. We need to list all of them. We need to make sure that we have unique chat rooms. All right, that's going to be interesting. What's going on here? Alex. How to install React Native and AWS. For React Native, we have, on this channel, we have the environment set up for both React Native, Expo, for both Windows and macOS. So we have 4 total videos for every use case. User already exists in database, perfect. And yeah, everything is working. All right, so give me 1 second. I'm going to be back and we are going to continue with our chat room users. So I will be right back. Don't go anywhere. All right, so I'm back and we can continue. So for the chat rooms, how we're gonna do them? Well, we're gonna create a chat room whenever we go to our list of contacts, and when we press on one of these contacts, we want to create a chat room with that user and start talking with them. As simple as that. So let's go ahead and do that right now. This list item is our components contact list item index. So here we have this pressable. Let's define a function for this pressable. So const on press equal to this. Let's start with a console warn pressed. Now I want to give this function to our pressable, and whenever let's go to that contacts. Whenever I press on these users, I see this function pressed. Perfect. Let's get some hydration. All right. So contact list item, we have it here. So what do we have to do? Well, as I said, firstly, we have to create a chat room. Create a new chat room. Then we need to add people to this chat room. And to add people to this chat room, what we have to do is chat room. Let me see how to explain it here. Yeah, I was explaining you that in the schema design here, we see that the relationship between our chat room and the user is a many-to-many. But there are no many-to-many relationship, and what Amplify is doing behind the scene is creating another table called chat room user, and that table is helping us add users to the chat room. So for every user that we want to add to a chat room, we need to create that invisible chat room user. But if we look in the apps in console, and if I'm gonna zoom in a bit here, and if I scroll, you should see here, create user chat room. This is the user that connects, this is the table that connects one user on the one side with one chat room on the other side. And because it connects them together, for the input, we have a chat room ID that specify which chat room are we adding the user to. And when we specify the user ID, we specify which user we're trying to add to that chat room. So that means that we have to add the clicked user to the chat room, and then add the authentication user to the chat room. These are our steps that we have to do in order to, and lastly, probably navigate to the newly created chat room. And before we start implementing it, let's see if we have any issues with this flow, creating a chat room. So if every time I press on a user, every time I create a new chat room, that means that we might have duplicated chat rooms with that user. This is not exactly what we want. So for that reason, before we do all of this, we need to first check if we already have a chat room with user. So, and if we have already a chat room with user, we simply will redirect there without going through the creating and adding them there. Okay, we're gonna get to this part a bit later, but now let's start with creating a new chat room. Creating a new chat room, for that, let's start importing. Let's import our API. Let's import our graph. Okay, I'm gonna do the AWS Amplify first, and then I'm gonna get the my caps lock key just decided to jump. And then let's do GraphQL operation. And what GraphQL operation we will need? Well, we will need to create a new chat room. So we will need something from our mutations because we want to create, that's a mutation. We take it from GraphQL mutations. Come on. GraphQL and then mutations, and we will take create chat room for this one. Create a chat room. Add the user to the chat room. That's gonna be create user chat room. This is adding user to a chat room. Add authentication user to the chat room. That's gonna be the same mutation. And check if we already have chat rooms. We're gonna handle that a bit later. So now let's go ahead and create a new chat room here. So const new chat room data equal to await API. Well, we need to make this function async. So API.GraphQL, then a GraphQL operation. Which operation? Create chat room. And then we need to provide here the input for the new room. The thing is that our creating a chat room doesn't need any data. If we look here at create chat room, we can provide the version, but that's automatically provided, and that's it. We don't need anything to provide here. We will simply use it as, like connecting things together. But we still have to provide this input even though it's empty. Okay, let's go ahead and, of course, console log new chat room data. Okay, let's open it here. Let's try to press on one of these. Pressed, we see data, create chat room, and information about that chat room, including its ID. The ID is very important because we will need it. So let's check if new chat room data dot create chat room, if it exists or if it doesn't. Let's do if it doesn't. Then we're gonna, let's for now simply console log error creating the chat room. If the data doesn't exist, that means that there is an error creating it. Otherwise, we can continue our flow, and I'm gonna do const new chat room equal to this in order to easier access it without having to always access it like this. Now this new chat room has an ID and it has like other information about the chat room, but we mostly are interested in the ID of it. Now add the clicked user to the chat room. For that we need to create a user chat room. So let's start by await API dot GraphQL. What we're gonna call the GraphQL operation. What operation? The create user chat room, and here for the input, we're gonna have to provide two things. If you remember, let's double check that here. Create user chat room, it has two required fields, chat room ID and user ID. So it has chat room ID and it has user ID. For the chat room ID, we're gonna get it from the newly created chat room, new chat room.id. For the user ID, we're gonna get it from the information here, user.id. Now we need to do the same thing for our user, add authentication user to the chat room. But yeah, the chat room ID is gonna be the same, only the user ID should be different. We need to get the ID of our user. And remember in the previous step when we connected authentication with database, now we can simply get the auth user from the auth. We also need to import it here. Auth. We simply can get this auth.current authenticated user. And using this auth user, we can specify the attributes.sub, and this is going to be the ID that is the same ID from our database. And this way we create this relationship between the database user without even having to query our database user, because we know that the sub is the same as the ID of the database user. All right, and the last step is to navigate to the newly created chat room. So we have a navigation.navigate where we have to navigate to a screen with a chat. So let's see in the navigation index, that's chat. And it needs some properties. I think it should be ID, but let's double check that. In the screens, we have a chat screen and we have a route. Well, we are not using it anymore, so let's simply send the ID of a chat room. So new chat room.id. Okay, let's see if everything works. Okay, all right, let's press on the first user. It's pressed and it automatically goes to the chat room. But because we don't query any data here, let's go ahead in our information here to see if everything worked correctly. So from the content, we should see one chat room that includes two users. So chat room R2 here, and if I look at one of them, the first one includes two users. One of them is this user that I'm authenticated with, which displays my phone number. And the second user is the one that I clicked on with the avatar. That's perfect. That's amazing. That's everything we needed here. So we have created a chat room when clicking on a user. Now we need to list all chat rooms. To list, regarding my the theme for the VS Code, I have a tutorial on the YouTube channel for the top 10 VS Code themes, top 10 VS Code extensions, and there I also specify the theme. I don't remember, if I'm not mistaken, it's community material theme, something like that. So let's move on to the next step to query all the chat rooms on the main screen. So if we go here to the chats, here instead of dummy data, we should actually query the chat rooms. Will this have end-to-end encryption? Today we're not going to implement that, but I'm interested in extending this application with more advanced features. Not sure if that's going to be encryption, but most probably we're going to extend it with sending different types of messages like images, videos, or audio. And doing other interesting features. I would like to get into that. Sorry. Why can't we use data store to fetch the user is exist or not, instead GraphQL API? I explained that a bit earlier, why we're not using data store here. I'm really not a big fan of data store. Even though I'm giving it a lot of chances, I'm actually using data store in one of my production projects. We'll see how it will go there. But in some situations, we get into some edge cases that data store like makes it a bit more complicated. Overall, it's a great tool, and for small application, it works really nice. But yeah, if application grows, there are some cons there. All right, guys. So as I said, we need to list all chat rooms to display them on this chats page. Okay, that's gonna be complicated a bit because we're gonna have to work with relationship and nested data. Let's have a look at where we need to query this information. Well, we need in the screens, in the chats screen. Here we are taking the chats from our assets, but what we have to do is to query them from our API. So let's import API and the GraphQL operation. And what GraphQL operation we want to import? Well, we want to import it from GraphQL queries. And the query is going to be list chat rooms. List chat rooms. By calling this list chat rooms, the problem is that it will give us all the chat rooms from the database. Yes, there are some ways to provide some filters. For example, yeah, let me see here. List chat rooms. So if I'm gonna query it, my query here, we see two of them. But yeah, as I said, like it's gonna return us all the chat rooms, even the ones that we're not part of. That's not what we want to do. We actually want to query only the chat rooms where we are a user. Again, it has some filters, but it's not gonna be something that will help us in this situation. What we can do is we can use the get user query to query our user, and by querying our user, let me get my ID, for example, from here. This is my ID, and let me put it here in the parameters of get user, and I'm gonna get name, image, and so on. So by simply querying my user, I get information about myself. But the cool thing about GraphQL is that we can query, in one single query, we can include relationship data and nested data. And what do I mean by that? Well, whenever I query the get user, I also can query all his chat rooms by simply adding them here in the items. We have a chat room ID, for example. And now we see that the user with my name is part of only one chat room, not of two of them. And that's exactly right. Because if we look at the previous chat room, I'm not in that one. We have two chat rooms. Okay, never mind. So it actually gives us the right chat room. But this is not an actually chat room. This is a user chat room, or how is it called? Chat room user or user chat room. Basically that intermediate table. So here we cannot query information about the actual chat room. But if we open up the chat room here, we go one level deeper, and here we can get the actual information about the chat room, when it was created, the last message, the messages from it, and yeah. And also, very important, users. Users that are part of a chat room. As you can see, our query becomes quite a bit complicated, and this means that we're not going to be able to rely on the query from here, because the query that was generated for the get user will get us so far. Like, it will not solve all the problems, because as we can see here, it gets the information about the user. It gets the information about all the user messages, which we actually don't need, so that's wasteful to query them. It gets the information about the chat rooms, but again, it only gets us information about one level, like the chat room user. It doesn't actually give information about the chat room itself. So yeah, that means that instead of relying on this query here, it would be better if we create our query ourselves with specifically the information we need in order to have this query optimized. Because as you can imagine, like, there are a lot of relationship between user, chat rooms, and so on. So in itself, this query is going to be a bit more expensive. So we have to make sure that we properly get the information, only the information that we need. So with that being said, we're going to get our user, but we don't need the name of our user. We're never rendering it. So why should we ask it? Then we get the chat rooms. In the items, which actually should be called chat room user, the ID, we don't need the ID of a chat room user. We need information about the chat room itself, because when we will click on it, we will send them actual chat room ID. Then do we need when it was created? I don't think so, because even though we have a date here, this refers to when was the last message. So actually in the chat room, we are interested in the last message. So let's open last message here and say we need the ID of the last message and the created at. When was the last message sent? In order to be able to display this information. And the text here is also from the last message. Let's check the text here. Okay, text, perfect. But for the users in the chat room, we're gonna get what? The ID and the name, right? And the, no. Again, these users here are chat room users. So we need to open the users and get the ID, image, and name. So as you can see, the query is quite complicated, but it will give us information that we need. It will give us information about the chat room and about the users inside that chat room. And based on these users, we'll be able to get the image and the name of that user. And also we will get the last message to display it here. So I think that's everything that we need so far. So let's go ahead and copy this query. And let's copy it and add it inside our screens. Let's go ahead and create a separate folder for our chats screen. Let's move this one here. Move. Make sure to update the imports from the navigation. And inside this folder, let's create a file called queries.js. This is going to be our custom queries for the chat screen. Let's do export list chat rooms equal to how they are written, queries as a string. So equal to a string and like this. Is it like this? Query. Yeah, but I'm not sure why I have a bit different. Maybe it's because of his GraphQL. Yes, wow, didn't know that. You live, you learn. And another thing I will like to change here is actually the header of this get user, because it has like these variable IDs that we can send through parameters. So I can actually simply rename this to get user. Well, why do I need to reinvent it if I can copy these two fields, query and get user, and replace it in our case with query and get user. And this way we're gonna be able to provide dynamic IDs and get this information dynamically. Okay, so let's try to run this do-it-yourself query that we created for our information. So going into the chat screen, let's yeah, we're not gonna need this list chat queries from there. We're gonna need it from queries, list chat rooms. So yeah, again, we're gonna need a use effect. And here, let's define the function fetch chat rooms equal async. And we can call this fetch chat rooms right away. So let's go ahead and const data, not data, but response equal await. With the API, we're gonna do a GraphQL query using a GraphQL operation, which is list chat rooms. And for the ID in the chat screens, for the ID, we need to provide the ID of a user for which we need to provide to get the chat rooms. To get the ID of a user, we simply will use the auth module. And here, let's get the auth user equal await authentication dot current authenticated user. Come on. And here we can provide auth user dot attributes dot sub. Let's have a look at our console response. Are you using WebSockets? No, for this application, we're gonna use, for real-time communication, we're gonna use GraphQL subscriptions. To do React, what language we should learn? With JavaScript. JavaScript, yeah, start with JavaScript. I'm not sure what's happening, so I'm gonna stop the server, start it again. Come on. Running on Android. Unable to resolve screens chat screen. That means that in our navigation it wasn't correctly updated. So from the main tab here where we import the chat screens, we need to import it from the chat screen like this. Now let's see the debugs. Yes, we see some information. We see data, get user, we see the chat rooms, which is an object. Okay, that's good. Chat rooms. which is an object, and it should have items. So let's go ahead and console log response dot data dot get, how is it called? Get user then chat rooms, get user then chat rooms, then items. And let's have a look at this console log. Undefined. Chat. I definitely did a mistake. Response dot data dot get user dot chat rooms. Oh, it's items should be. Now items is an array of chat rooms. And yeah, we at the moment have only one chat room. So, all right, let's check like if, no, let's simply set it into state and then we're gonna know how to work with it. So we're gonna see how to work with it, yeah. Chat rooms and set chat rooms equal use state. Initially it's gonna be an empty array, and let's go ahead and give here the chat rooms to our flat list and remove the dummy data import from the top. All right, we don't see anything, but if instead of console log we do set chat rooms, and define evaluating chat user.image. Yeah, let's go in the chat list and do a couple of things here. For example, whenever we are accessing the user, for example, let's do it safely. I mean the user fields, chat user like this, as well like this. Last message as well, we need to access it safely, because last message can be null, and when you just create a chat room, it's gonna be null. And we already see one chat room there. If I'm gonna go to the contacts and I'm gonna press on one more, okay, I can go back to my list here, and if I'm gonna refresh, I should see 2 rows there. It's not exactly what I wanted to see, but it's yeah, it's 2 rows basically. And it's not what I wanted to see because of the information that we receive. So let's see at console log chat, what information do we receive here? We see that the chat is a chat room, I mean has a chat room here. So probably we can send here directly item.chat room. Item.chat_room. Yes. And this will send their last message, ID, and a list of users. Users items are an array of 2 items. Okay, perfect. But the problem is that, yeah, like if I look at the console log chat dot, how did I say users? Users dot items. Users dot items. Then we should see an array of 2 users. First user, which is the other user, and then me. All right. So for the information that we need to display on the screen, for example, the user image, we're going to take it from the chat users items. Let's say at position 0 first. So let's do const user equal chat users items at position 0. And now instead of accessing it from the chat, we can simply access it from the user. Same thing here. And the same thing here. And if I save, now I should see their names. I really hope that I will. No, because why? No, because why? Console log user, let's do that. So user items dot user. And now, yes, and now we see the name and the image. of that specific user. The thing is that the user is not always going to be at position 0. So an improvement here would be loop through chat users items and find a user that is not us, that is not the authenticated user. But I know that whenever we press on a chat room there, I firstly add the other user and then I add myself, and I can assume that the other user will be at position 0. Again, this is not how's it called? This is not. I mean, it can be otherwise as well. So to have it like production ready, it would be wise to loop through them and check based on the ID. I'm pretty new to AWS ecosystem. By any chance, is it possible to integrate machine learning into this application? Yes, it's possible to integrate machine learning with basically any application, because the machine learning model will usually run on the backend. So it really doesn't matter what is the application, because the data we will receive it through the API. And from the application standpoint, it really doesn't make a difference what is the data that is coming. So if you have a machine learning model behind the scenes that generates the data and puts it into the database, and then the application can consume it, that's perfectly fine. Also on this topic, Amplify has predictions here. You can look, it's quite complicated, but you can look into it, and you can implement how's it called, recommendation algorithm with it. So if you have like a shop, like you can recommend users items that they are more likely to buy. All right, so with the chat rooms, I think we are good. We're gonna see what's up with the last message after we actually add a message there. For now, that's good. We can navigate to the chat with ID chat. The ID is going to come from the, I don't know from where, from chat. Let's see. Last message ID. Yeah, I think it's from here. So chat.id, it's okay. And if I press on the user, it goes here. Awesome. So that means that we implemented the list all chat rooms query in our application. The next step is having unique chat rooms between two users, because now if I'm gonna go in the context and press again on the first user, it's gonna create a new chat room with that user, and we're gonna have duplicated chat rooms here. I would like to come back to this feature a bit later and move on to the next step for the messages. Or should I implement it right now? Let's have a look at the messages first, because it's a bit easier, and after that we're gonna think how to solve that question. Hey, Mr. Frank, thank you very much. This build is awesome. Let's go. How are you doing, my man? I remember you were watching the channel for quite some time, but I haven't seen you around for a bit. How have you been? All right, so our next task is going to be on this page, and we need to, one, create messages when we press on this send button. We need to get all messages, and also we need to think about updating the last message in the chat room. Okay. You know what? I think I'm gonna spend a bit of time to have like unique chat rooms between two users right now, just to have like all the code like together. So creating unique chat rooms for the users. How we're gonna do that? What would be the logic there? Our screen there is the, no, it's not in the screen, it's in the component contact list item. Yeah, here is where we need to check if we already have a chat room with a user. So I'm going to extract this into, I don't know, a utility function, just because there will be a bit of code there and I don't want to mess it up here. So let's go ahead in the source and create a folder, I don't know, services, and for a new file, chat room service.js. And here, let's define a function, export default, get chat room for user1 ID and user2 ID. We basically need to get the chat room between these two users. How we're gonna do that? A very optimal query would require us to write some backend code to properly query the information for the database for these two things. But in our case, we are going to first get all chat rooms of user 1, then get all chat rooms of user 2, chat rooms, yes, chat rooms, then get the common chat rooms. We can also remove chat rooms with more than 2 users, because in that case that's a group chat. We haven't implemented it yet, but it's good to think about this use case as well, because one chat room can have multiple users, and if we're in a group with that person, we still want to have like a private one-to-one message group with him. Okay, let's start from the top. We're going to have to import the API. We're going to have to from AWS Amplify. Besides the Amplify, we need a GraphQL operation. So get all chat room of user 1. We're gonna use a very similar query as we used in the screens chat rooms here, queries. So let's go ahead and copy this query. I'm gonna copy in the, I don't know, directly in this service file, because we need to get the user with ID, then we get the chat rooms, items, chat room ID. And I think that's it, like this. Well, I'm looking right now, and I think there is another option. Instead of querying all the chat rooms for user 1 and then querying all the chat rooms for user 2, we can simply query all the chat rooms for user 1 and check if the user 2 is in any of those chat rooms. So yeah, we have users, item, user ID. I don't need name and image here because only need the ID. I don't need the last message, so it's gonna be yeah. Let's try this one. So const my chat rooms equal, my chat rooms is equal to and as well, I think instead of receiving my user ID, I'm going to get it here using the auth. So const auth user equal await auth current authenticated user. Current authenticated user. So my chat rooms is going to be API dot, await API dot GraphQL. I'm already tired. Await.api. GraphQL, and here we will have a GraphQL operation. And what operation? We need this list chat rooms with the ID of user.attributes.isub. Okay, and the name of a function probably is not going to be get chat room, but get common chat room with user, and here we're going to specify the user ID. So now my chat rooms, let's simply console log my chat rooms, and we're going to see what we get there. Now in our chat list item, let's import this function, import from services, not screens, but services, then chat room service. And from the chat room service, I'm gonna get common, this one. And here, check if we already const chat existing chat room equal await get common chat room with the user that we are clicking on. Existing. And the logic will be if existing chat room is not null, then we don't need to continue because we want to simply navigate to the ID existing chat room dot ID. All right, let's go ahead in our contact list and see what do we get. A require model source service chat room, which throw an exception. Can find variable get common chat room with user. Oh, not default export const. In here from the chat room, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna comment out the creation of these chat rooms until I have that function ready, not to create unnecessary data in my database. So right now, if I'm going to press on one of these users, we see data, get user, chat rooms, and it's an object. These chat rooms are chat rooms that I am part of. So let's do here response, and I'm gonna do chat rooms equal response dot data dot get user. And it's get user with like this. Get user dot items. Now let's do that here. Well, we should also do that. And if I press, it's an empty array because my chat rooms are empty. chat rooms items. Oh, it's get user dot chat rooms dot items. It's like this. Now if I press, it's again empty. What's up with chat rooms? If I press, undefined. Oh, get user. I'm doing some silly mistakes. Yes, now it should be working with items or empty array. And yeah, these are the chat rooms that I am part of. I am actually part of 2 of them. And as you can see, yes, that's right. I'm part of 2 chat rooms here. One with Carolee and one with Raid. So now what we have to do is to loop through all the chat rooms and see if there is any chat room that contains the user that I'm interested in. So let's do it like this. Chat rooms. We need to find the chat room. Find the chat room that has chatroom.users. Chatroom.users.items. If that items, if any of those items if user.id is equal to the ID that we received here. Now let's go ahead and console log the chat room. Let's console log this chat room. And if I press here, find, and define is not an object, chat room users items. Chat room. Let's go ahead and debug some of the stuff here. So let's do console log to the chat room itself. Oh, it has, I think, chatroom.chatroom. This is an item, and we have item.chatroom. Most probably here that's going to be the same. Item chatroom items. Any is not a function. It's not any but some. If some of the items, if some of the users have the ID, that means that we have a chat room with that user. Undefined, but first one, yes, chat room. Why it's still an array? Because we are doing chat rooms find, we need one element of those. Chat room with ID, with the users. Wait a second. Oh, it's this one, but the second one is undefined. It's undefined because let's do chat rooms dot chat rooms at position 0. I just want to see the structure of our users. So chat rooms at position 0 dot chat room dot users. Let's see though that field. It's items user object. And if I take the first user, what do I see there? No, I need item set dot item set position 0. The queries are a bit crazy. Yeah, user is an object with ID. So I need chat rooms. We loop through them here, and for every item we access the chat room here, then users, then items, items, if it's item here, so I need to check item.user.id. User item, let's call it user item, not to confuse it with here chat room item. Now if I do that, I see the chat room, and if I check the other one, it's undefined. I think it works, and I can simply now return this chat room, or I can, yeah, like that, return chat room. And if I'm gonna press on this one, I'm gonna be redirected here. I don't need this console warn anymore. If I'm gonna do here, nothing is gonna happen. The second one, nothing is gonna happen. Only the ones that I have a room with, like this one. Perfect. So now I'm gonna uncomment all of the rest of the code, and we will be sure that we don't create duplicated chat rooms. Let's double check if everything is working. For example, here I'm not gonna create a new one. I'm gonna go here, but if I go to the Erna, I should create a new one. And if I come back and reload the application, we see that we have a new chat room. And as you can see, my assumption that the other user will always be first is wrong, because here we see my phone number, which means that my authenticated user is first. So it doesn't mean that always it's gonna follow the same order. So let's fix that real quick in the components contact chat list item. And here let's have a state variable for the user, or no, let's actually do it like this. User is gonna be items dot find item, the item dot user dot id that is different than our own user ID. Our own user ID, we're gonna get it in the, we need to get it from the authentication module. So for that reason, that's why I didn't want to do it, because it complicates a bit the code unnecessarily. So user set user, we need to query it, use state null. Now in a use effect, in the use effect, we are going to const fetch user. This part is easy, but the part we need a const auth user equal await a. Let's import this one as well. And let's get the current authenticated user, because we need to check the item that has a different ID than ours. So of user attributes dot sub attributes like this. And then after finding it, that's gonna be a user item, and we can check. Yeah, we can set user using user item dot user, yeah, like this. And let's not forget to call this fetch user function inside our use effect. Okay, good. Now, yeah, now everything is working good as before. And the first chat room where I was the first user now displays the second user, which has a different user ID than mine. Perfect. So that means that we implemented this fix as well. And with that being said, we are done with the chat rooms, definitely. We have implemented all of the things that we wanted there. So unique chat rooms between two users. Perfect. Let's go ahead and git commit B5. Is it 5? Yeah. Chat rooms. And let's do git push. No, not yet. Okay. So with the chat rooms, we are done, and we can move on to the next step. The next step is our chat room, and here we're gonna work with creating a message, getting all the messages, and so on. So for that, let's go ahead in the components input box, because the input box is the one that we see here at the bottom. Input box. And when we press send, what we have to do is to create a new message. So to create a new message with our API, we remember that we have to import API from AWS Amplify. We also need the GraphQL operation, and we need the create message method from our queries. So from GraphQL query, not queries, mutations, because this is a mutation. Mutations. The mutation is called create message. And let's go ahead and implement it here. So let's first make the function async. Let's do API dot await API dot GraphQL operation. And what operation? We want the create message, and the variables will have an input, and here is going to be new message. Let's go ahead and define the data for our new message, but for that, let's see what data do we need. For that, we can check the schema here. So let's add a mutation. Create message. Where is create message? Create message. And for the input, we need the chatroom ID to specify in which chatroom we send the message, the text, and the user ID. So these are the three things that we need. I'm going to copy them from here, and I'm going to paste them here. Chatroom ID, text, and user. For the text, it's simple. It's the new message that we wrote in the input box. It got rid of my styles. Wait a second. I'm gonna do some Control Z until I see my styles. Okay, here they are. And I can now. Yeah. For the chatroom ID, we're gonna think about it in a second, because for the user ID, that's pretty straightforward. We already know how to get the user ID using the authentication. So let's do const of user equal await auth dot current authenticated user. and we can take the of user.attributes.sub. For the chatroom ID, as I said, we're gonna receive it in the parameters because we don't know here in the input box what is the chatroom ID. So where we use this input box, that's in our screens, chat screen, where we render the input box, we need to send also the chatroom ID, which we're gonna get from the... Well, we don't have a chatroom here at this moment, but we have a route that if I console log the route, we should see that it has a parameter for the ID. Yeah, so chatroom ID equal route.params.id. So let's send this chatroom ID here. Okay, let's try to send a message. Hello. Let's try to send it. Sending new message undefined. Sending new message. Why is it undefined? Variable input. Variable input has null value for type string. Why new message was undefined? We're gonna see. Value set new message. Hello. Oh, because we have here new message. Let's change the name of a state with text, set text, simply text. Text input text. No. This one is text. And here value is text and on change set text. Okay, let's see now. Hello. Sending, but the promise is still rejected. Why confirm variable set new message? Oh yeah, because at the end we need to do set text with empty string, but that means that the message actually was sent. So we can go in our content here in the messages and we see the message hello with a chatroom ID and with a user ID. And hello again. We will see that it appears here automatically. All right, so creating messages is done. We saw how we did that. Now let's go ahead and query our messages. So create a message is done. Get all messages for the chat room. Let's see what query we will use, because we can use the list messages, but list messages will give us all the messages. So let's check in the filter if we can filter by the chat room ID, and it seems that we can. Yeah, we will be able to filter based on the chat room ID. Or another option would be to get the chat room by ID, and then get the messages like this. That's also possible. And I think we're gonna use this method. If I'm not mistaken, this is a bit more performant because it will use the index behind the scene to link these messages. So get chat room, let's do it with the get chat room. In the screens, chat screen, let's go ahead and import API from AWS Amplify. We're going to import API. We're going to import the GraphQL operation. And what GraphQL operation? GraphQL queries get chat room. Okay, let's define the state variable for our chat room. Chat room set chat room equal use state. Initially probably it's gonna be null. Yeah, and we can add here if chat room is null, then that means that we're still loading. So let's simply return a activity indicator. Reload. Okay, so now let's go ahead and query our chat room, and we're gonna do it in a use effect. And we can do API.GraphQL GraphQL operation for our get chat room with the ID chat room ID. And after that's done, we can simply use then and result set chat room with the result dot data dot get chat room. Let's have a look at the information that we receive about the chat room here and see if we have everything that we need. Let's reload. Vladislav, hello. I'm good. How are you doing? So we have information about the chat room, including last message. We have messages. Very good. And this is actually what we're interested in the messages. So our flat list will be chat room dot messages. Well, let's wait a bit. Let's actually look at the chat room dot messages just to see what we have there. Okay, here we have items with the actual messages. That's good. That's perfect. So we need messages.items. We need to send this one to our flat list. And define is not an object evaluating user ID. Okay, let's go ahead in our message here. And let's add some question marks. For example, like this. Hello. We have text. We have time. The only thing that doesn't work properly is my message, because let me console log the actual message information to see how we can get it. I think we can work with the user ID. Instead of accessing information about the user, we can simply do if message.user ID is, and here it was a hard-coded thing, but we need the const of user. We need the of user here. Import of from AWS Amplify. Await current authenticated user. And here we should check if it's the same as the sub. And it indeed is the same as sub, because now if I'm gonna go, for example, here, and basically change the ID to the other user, for example, the hello, right? Link to an existing user, for example, if I'm gonna link it to, that one, save changes. And if now I'm gonna go here, why is my message ID? I think it's still getting the same, it's getting from the cache. Let me try to insert a new message. Good. Linking to a chat room with this ID and from a user, I don't know, this one. Save message. And now if I'm gonna go here, oh, it's actually the same. It's good here. We have 3 messages. User ID is kind of different for all of them. Oh, because it's an async here, but we made the function async. Okay, I'm gonna have to define state variable is me, set is me, use state. Initially is me, probably is gonna be false. Here instead of returning, I'm gonna set is me in the state, because we have like this async function. And here we can simply check is me, and here as well is me. Save. All right, now it works better, and only the first message remained on the right and the other on the left. All right, that was with messages. Create a new message, get all messages, and the last step is actually it takes a bit of time until it realizes that it should be there. Oh, but I need to call this is my message in the so much complexity just because of this await authentication, and we can very easily improve this by having a context and saving the data about the authenticated user in the context and having access to it every time. Maybe we can show how to do that in the next episode, because it will simplify a lot of calls. Like we will not need the use effect, we will not need the use state, and so on. And now, yes, now it works better. So we have created a message, got all messages. Lastly, we need to update the last message in the chat room, because on the main screen, we will always show the message of a last message, the text of a last message. And in our chat room, if you remember, we have this chat room last message ID. So let's go ahead and update whenever we send a new message. Let's update this chat room to point to the last message in order to be able to simply query it on the first screen. So for that, what do we have to do? Where we send the message, and that's in our components input box index, where we send the new message, we should also set the new message as last message of the chat room. So let's go ahead and do that. For that, we need to actually run an update mutation. We're gonna update the chat room. Update chat room. We're gonna update the chat room. But updating the chat room, we need some information about the chat room that we need to update. And besides the ID, we also need, for example, the version, because every time we update an object with DynamoDB, whenever the version is enabled, we need to always increment that version of the object. So here, instead of receiving the chat room ID, I would rather receive a chat room object, because now in the chat screen, we already have this object chat room, and we can simply send it here as chat room to the input box. Now we have a chat room. That means that we can update the chat room. So let's go ahead and run the API.GraphQL. We want to run the GraphQL operation. Which one? The update chat room and the variables. Let's see what variables do we need whenever we want to update a chat room. So for update chat room here, for the input, we need the version. We need the chat room last message ID, and a very important the ID, because we need to know what chat room are we trying to update. So let's copy all of it from here. Input version. As I said, we need to increase the current version of the chat room. So let's do chat room dot underscore version +1. The chat room last message ID is going to be new message data equal to that. So it's going to be new message data dot create message dot ID. And the ID of a chat room is the chat room dot ID. And with that being said, let's see. This is our last message. Send. Possible and handle promise rejection. Let's have a look. Unhandled, can't find variable chat room ID. Where am I using it? It's here. So chat room ID is gonna be chatroom.id. Okay, last message. Sending last message. I don't need this console warn anymore. What did you say there? Did it work or not? I didn't see. Probably didn't. Last send. Possible unhandled promise rejection. Let's see the error. Client version is greater than the corresponding server version. Version. I think we don't have to increase it. It will automatically increase. Am I right? Last. Now I think it worked. We don't see any errors. And if I'm going to refresh it here, we should see the last message. We don't see it yet, but let's see if it's in the database. Let's go ahead. Yes, we see last message ID here. That means that let's double check the way we are querying the chat list here, and let's see why don't we see the last message in there. I'm gonna go in the chat list item and let's console log the chat, console log chat. So last message dot text, last message. How do we render it? Oh, we need to make it capital last message. Save. Yes. And for the text as well. Yes. Now we see last here. How are you? If I send this message and I go back and I refresh, we still need to refresh because we didn't implement real-time data. But after refreshing, we see that the last message is how are you, and it's a few seconds ago. Isn't it amazing? All right. So now every time we are sending a new message, we are properly updating it in the database so that the chat room points to the right message that was lastly sent. And if our user sends a new message, from his side, he's also going to update the last message. And now his message is going to be the last one and will be visible here. Can you do this in VTL using DynamoDB transactions? Oh, that would be interesting. That's quite advanced, and we can do it like in a separate video probably. But yeah, if I do that, like probably it's gonna be quite difficult for a lot of people. Even for me, I don't say that I'm any different. What do we do now? Because for the chat room, we updated the last message and I think we are good. For the chat room, we also will have to do a couple of things. For example, sort by sort chronological. Oh no, logical. To have like the messages in chronological order, because at the moment we are not. What else? What else? And the last step is our real-time data to listen for new messages, to update everything. But my idea is that in order not to rush this process with real-time data, which is quite an important topic, I suggest going for it during the next week, including with other improvements like sorting chronologically, including real-time data, and other extra feature that I'm going to prepare for the next week. That's going to include maybe filtering, pagination, storage. Storage is also a very important topic that we will not be able to cover it today, but it's a must-have in this type of applications, including like storing images for our users and also maybe including image messages. That's also possible. So please let me know what other features you'd like me to add to this build, and we can include them during the next week's build. And for today, I want to say thank you very much for being here with me till the end. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and if you did, please consider subscribing to our channel, because from our analytics, we see that more than 90% of people watching our tutorials are not yet subscribed, and yeah, that hurts a bit. But yeah, hope you'll manage to build this application yourself. And my recommendation is to never stop here. Try to add extra features, try to add, to go that extra mile. Be curious, like how I would do it differently, how I would add that feature, how I would do that in a different way, in a more performant way. Because what I'm doing here is definitely not the only way. I don't say that this is the best way, but this is a way to get started and to build something meaningful. And yeah, That's everything for today. Subscribe to the channel, like, turn on the notification bell not to miss our future video, because we are going live every Friday at the same time, 3 p.m. GMT +1. And also we are publishing a lot of videos lately, if you saw. Yeah, have a nice weekend ahead, guys, and I will see you next week also here